Welcome to this new episode of the Executive Copy Club. Today we have the immense pleasure to welcome here Sue Bridgman. Sue, welcome.
Thank you so much for having me.
Very, very happy to have you. And I've been, talking about you and hearing about you in very, very good terms by some very, very close friends of mine. So really happy to have you at least here in this new episode. So I was very impressed by doing some research about your work, about everything related to the communication intelligence that you have been developing. This is a very compelling aspect and a concept that is really worth being explored further. I know you are a book writer, a bestseller book writer. You're also a guest speaker in many international events. And you're the global leader, I would say, of the concept of communication intelligence. So without further ado, I would like to ask you a little bit to talk about that topic in particular. What is communication intelligence?
Communication intelligence is known as CQ. It's a measurable personal competency for the digital age. So what does this mean? Essentially, we're looking at how do we biohack our physiology of anxiety and nervousness and adapt our communication skills so that we can connect with the neurochemistry of the audience through verbal and nonverbal strategies.
Oh, that's very interesting and very innovative. So it resonates against or in parallel to emotional intelligence and just intelligence, right? So what's the difference and how can it be measured?
Communication intelligence is the ability to have a mind-body-voice formula where we control our inner voice, the narrative that's impacting our physiology of perhaps our anxiety and nervousness, if that is something which impacts an individual, and then the vocal physiology of how we present. The reason it's measurable is because communication intelligence has different parameters that can be aligned with performance metrics and organizational metrics. And we can look at ability to lead through communication. We can look at one's ability to connect with teams. There are a whole host of different factors which we can look at to determine what those performance metrics are.
You also mentioned the concept of Speakfluence. So what does it mean, Speakfluence?
So Speakfluence is the ability to speak with influence. And Speakfluence came to me almost 2 decades ago. And I thought to myself, what is it about leaders where we have all this brilliance around the world, but some are those who actually do the technical work, and there are others who are able to share a vision with impact and inspire an entire generation or entire community or global audience. And I wanted to create a formula where those who perhaps didn't have the belief that they too could speak fluence could do so in a measurable format.
That comes from fundamentals of psychology, and it's applicable to all leaders and executives today. Can you explain a little bit how it works and why it would be of interest for executives to embrace that approach?
I think it's important for executives to understand that whereas once upon a time, communication was known as a soft skill, it is now a survival skill. If we look at where society is headed with artificial intelligence and the way in which the global economy is evolving, the one skill which leaders can differentiate themselves with is the ability to communicate and the ability to inspire trust in those that they're interacting with. And I believe truly that if you look at the number of micro skills that are required for a human to communicate and connect, and when you're knowledgeable about all those micro skills, it's trainable, which is key. A lot of people believe that they are inherently a certain type of a speaker or not a speaker. It's important to understand that it's a trainable skill.
Fascinating. And you started your career in law. Then you moved into communication and psychology. So can you, drive us a little bit throughout your journey, and how did you manage to move from law to psychology and get that, clarity about what needs to be done?
So I'm known as the why person, if you will. And when I was a commercial litigator, I always ask, why did my message resonate in this circumstance, or why didn't it? And when I started going down that why, I went down many rabbit holes and I started looking into the neurochemistry of language, the psychology of the audience, the psychology of how is it that you can influence. And through that research, I developed a passion for helping others. So as a commercial litigator, I was the voice of others. If you look at my journey from lawyer to communication consultant, what's important is to know that it is a huge gift to be empowered to find your voice. And as much as it's an honor to be the voice of a client, it is that much more of an honor to be trusted to help someone find their voice. And that's become my passion.
A lot of CEOs actually have some degree of anxiety. One thing is to be a good CEO. Another thing is to manage their own fears and anxiety. So how would your approach help those CEOs and executives in a broader sense to mitigate that and to tame, that fear and anxiety?
What's important to know is your true essence and message cannot be shared if your body's hijacked by your physiology. And the key, first, if you think back to my comments on mind, body, voice, if we can master our mind, we can then ensure that our body is no longer hijacked, and only then will our vocal physiology flow. And so the holistic approach will empower any CEO who's often wearing a mask. I work with individuals from all over the world, and they are highly successful individuals, but they will often say that I feel like I'm wearing a mask and I know I could be that much more confident or that much more bold or that much more properly placed in the boardroom. And in order to achieve that, it's important to know that you have to overcome any hijacking of the physiology.
So we're in the Middle East. We're in Dubai right now. And of course, what we do here is embedded into the local culture. So what have you seen, in the region that would set the approach for executive different and apart from the rest of the world?
I believe it is so culturally diverse, as you noted, and adaptability is key. A big part of communication intelligence is to be able to adapt your message based on how your audience is responding. So to elevate your capacity to do that and to track and measure that organizationally can differentiate a CEO from a superior CEO. Number one step in that journey would be to build that awareness of how am I currently functioning and where do I need to get? And then an action plan as to how to improve one's personal performance on that regard.
What part of your legal training show most in your current, campaign about communication intelligence, for example?
I think in terms of legal training, understanding the power of language. And when I talk about a mind-body-voice approach, persuasive speech, if we look back historically to the Aristotelian persuasive modes, to teach the academic side of persuasive speech is fabulous, but then to integrate it with the holistic angle of, you could have all this brilliance in your mind, but if it is not flowing in a way that's impacting your audience, then communication intelligence is not being maximized. As much as it's important to have a message, what's not important is how you just communicate it, but whether it's remembered. And so taking the academic background from my legal education and then adding layers of audience resonance and vocal physiology is been a very interesting journey.
And what's also fascinating is that you explain how the body can be a limitation by producing cortisol, for example, or the opposite is also true by if you master your body and you control it, then there would be a production of oxytocin, right? To try to balance emotions and reveal your true self, right? Can you elaborate a little bit on that aspect?
Extremely important to remember that our vocalization in terms of content is about 7% of our message, our communication message. About 38% is our vocal physiology, and about 55% is our nonverbal communication. Each of these three pillars of our communication can impact the audience from a neurochemical perspective. So the language you choose can elicit trust through spiking one's cortisol or increasing the oxytocin, as you said. Similarly, your vocal tone. You could say the same word in two completely different tones and elicit one or the other neurochemical. And the third being your nonverbal communication. The position in which your hands are placed, the position in which your legs are placed, all of these can express micro expressions which are or are not intended. And so once you become aware of which language structures, verbal and nonverbal communication messages elicit which neurochemicals, this can truly become your superpower.
So there's a little bit of a theater play, right? So one is acting and controlling his acts. And so would it be by practicing speech in a room or what would be, the route to follow to kind of improve that type of communication?
It's important to be extremely particular in your routine, in your CQ routine. So that requires you to assess what your week looks like, determine what your goals are, for example, for a specific series of meetings, and then create micro goals for each of those meetings, assess in advance and post-meeting what your goal is and whether it was achieved, if not why. Once you take this very specific approach, and it could be, for example, that you want to use certain language structures to insert yourself at the boardroom table. You have to figure out exactly what your goal is and how you're going to implement it, and then follow through as to whether you were successful or not.
Is there a difference between men and female regarding, communication intelligence? Or they implement it the same way, they have the same issues? Or because in the boardrooms, as you know, I mean, the position of female has been complex, and there is a battle to put more female on the boardroom. So I guess it's probably more complicated for them to get presence and assertiveness.
I think there are some neurobiological reasons for that, which is fascinating. There was actually a Harvard Business School study done where they looked at the resonance of a female voice in the male brain. And it showed that it's not, I don't think there's always malintent. I think that it's just what pitch can resonate and actually land, if you will, with the male brain. So if that's the case, let's put any malintent aside. If we just say that we can adjust our voice to a lower resonance, then that could help one become better heard and perhaps viewed as more authoritative. Some would argue that's not being authentic. I've spoken about this at many women's conferences, at literature festivals, and it's come up a lot. And people are saying, well, it's 2026, and why do we need to not be authentic? I'm not saying I agree with it. What I would argue, though, is we can't change the physiology. And so if you can adapt in a certain circumstance, then that would be helpful. Second item, which comes up quite often in my discussions and program planning with women leaders, is that I believe often women tend to wait later to hear what other members of the room will share and then share their ideas. So learning how to insert oneself early in the conversation through industry specific language, and this is something which I support with in various organizations, learning how to do that under pressure, because again, in times when you feel that you're being judged, your cortisol spikes.
Yes.
And when your cortisol spikes, you can't remember the phrases which would help you insert yourself into a conversation. So understanding that, being guided on that is very helpful for female leaders.
And how do you regain control? Because you could be carried away, right? In a meeting or in a boardroom, you're in a tough negotiation, cortisol spikes, and you can realize actually you're over the board, right? So how can you, regain control, maybe calm down and recover the proper communication level that you need actually to be heard? How can you do that?
So I think leadership is evolving, and what will differentiate leaders is the ability to biohack and become highly attuned and aware as to what is happening physiologically and how that's affecting their perception externally. And to understand, almost to place distance between the purpose of a meeting and the message and how one will handle the expression of the message, that is where one starts to strive for what's called a communication flow state. So if you can, first of all, control the message, if you recall the mind-body-voice formula, if you can control the inner narrative of what your triggers are and what it is that is going to spike your cortisol, that's step one. Step two is to understand, where is my resting beats per minute, my resting BPM? Where is my stress BPM? And how do I get my stress BPM to my resting BPM when in a pressurized situation, when in a negotiation, in a heated boardroom? It's very challenging, but you need to feel it. And there are different methodologies to build that awareness in advance through exercise, through tracking of BPM, and through breath control. And that's something that our programs graduate. It's not something you learn on the spot. It's something which you train your body to do, as if you're going hiking and going to do Kilimanjaro. There are ways you train your body. There are ways you train your body to biohack.
So that's quite interesting, and at the same time quite mysterious. So if someone wants to really work on it, what are the ways you offer around you? I mean, is there a seminar? Is there a book? Is there a subscription? What do you provide actually to someone interested?
The book that I've written recently is called The CQ Edge, and it's how to eliminate your physiology of anxiety and nervousness and maximize your communication intelligence. The book not only includes strategies and in terms of the science and the theory behind how you can maximize your communication intelligence, it also has a 6-week tracking journal at the back. And so you can follow the exercises and apply it to a current professional or personal scenario to track your progress. The second way one could do that is to enroll in our digital program, which will be coming up very soon, being released very soon. And we also offer bespoke programs for individuals and also for teams and organizations. It's important, though, organizationally, to understand that you invest in competency which can be measured. And so in order to do that, the step one would be to create a CQ, Communication Intelligence Organizational Ethos, and then align your organizational goals and vision alongside the training which is available.
And you put forward the concept of imposter anxiety. What does it mean?
When we talk about imposter syndrome in the context of communication intelligence, it's important to know that your goal in life should be to be an authentic speaker. If you think back to the statistics, public speaking is the number one fear above death globally. Now, what happens when individuals are facing this imposter syndrome, they're actually questioning whether they're being true to themselves and whether they own their space. So what's important to know in that scenario is that you are at that table for a reason. You should own your message and not question who you are in that moment, but know that you earned that seat. And that is the best way to overcome that scenario and that mental state. When we talk about inner voice, imposter syndrome comes from that inner voice, which plagues one's existence, which plagues one's personality. And the only way to strive for better is to strive for authenticity.
And you were mentioning that anxiety is not a personal flaw. It's a pattern, and it could be mitigated, right?
Absolutely. It is something which can be tracked physiologically. And I believe once individuals understand that it is within their control and it is an autonomous response, if you look at how the body reacts to scenarios where we question ourselves, where we feel we're being judged, where we feel we're under pressure, our body goes into a fight or flight response. In order to be aware that this can be overcome, you need to first understand what is happening physiologically, how your adrenal glands are kicking in unexpectedly, and then how can you control your heart rate in that moment. And let's remember, if your cortisol is spiked, it doesn't matter what brilliance you have in mind, none of that will flow. Your communication flow state is completely blocked. And so if we can, number one, bring awareness, number two, implement biohacking, number three, implement the strategies that are outlined in a CQ formula, that's when one can truly become an authentic speaker.
Oh, very good. And I know that you've been very involved in education and leadership. What worries you about how communication is taught today?
I believe that communication is still viewed as a soft skill. And I believe that people need to understand it is our survival skill. If we look at the fact that humanoid robots are in mass production currently and expected to be released in 2026, I was on a recent trip overseas where I learned this and I was able to observe them, observe how human-like they can move. You might have read my article recently on this. It is very worrisome because as humans, we need to think about how do we retain our essence, and our essence is through communication and connection. But that, I think, in our good luck, it is the hardest thing to achieve and to code. So if we can work on this competency and really harness it, I believe that we don't have to worry about it.
The fear of the novelty, including, humanoid robots, this is something a bit scary for everyone. AI is also quite scary. How do you think those new technologies impact communication today?
When we look at AI is automating tasks, but it's not going to automate human essence. And I'm hopeful for this. So if we can work on that human essence, I think we're in a safe zone. I think if we look at how we can retain our relevance and work on the elements of our being, which can't be, as I said, coded, I think that that would be our saving grace.
Coming back to the measurement, can you give us some elements about how would you measure communication intelligence? Because it seems like it's a very abstract concept, but have you managed to find ways to put numbers on it?
Well, you can look at, first of all, you look at where everyone, if you have an individual, you would look at where their baseline competency is on a series of metrics. It's all about your communication metrics and how they relate to your industry and your organization, because it varies. Communication is very complex, so it needs to be broken down into micro skills. Look at your relational quality. If you were to look at your ability to connect, at your ability to inspire trust, if you're to look at your ability to manage large teams effectively, you need micro elements for each of these competencies. And once you can ascribe a value based on perhaps their baseline from a video profile and a 360 review, if that's what's implemented in your organization, you can then create a value that they need to ascribe to, and then prepare training which is specific to that individual.
Yes.
I'm not a big believer that everyone should get standardized training. I think it's a waste of time. And I think time is precious. It's the only thing that we have.
Yes.
And so bespoke programming is what works best. The way we have been successful is every individual who's worked with us would come and do a pre-programmed survey through a self-assessment. And that, interestingly, is where the imposter syndrome is revealed. That is where they set their individual goals, because you're not going to have success with someone if you're telling them what to learn if they don't believe it's an issue for them.
What do you think the future leaders would need to unlearn about their public speaking and self-expression?
Leaders need to understand that self-expression is a highly human skill. It is something which is within their capacity to make them shine. They don't want to be just a leader. They want to be an inspiring leader. And so to be able to build self-awareness as to what the organization's evolving needs are and adapt their communication for that future vision is key.
Today, you have a lot of coaches everywhere. mentors, coaches, especially in the Middle East, you have like it looks like an inflation of number of coaches everywhere. Um, so how would your approach, your philosophy, your technique fit into this avalanche of potentials to ask a coach to help them?
First of all, I don't like the word coach in respect of what CQ offers. I think a coach is someone who has more of a directive approach. CQ is an invitation to maximize one's communication potential through self-awareness and through a mind-body-voice formula, which requires full commitment. And it's more of a communication strategy for success. And when one is mindful and intentional in how they're going to transform their communication skills, that is when one will be successful. Coaches will often give loose strategies on how to improve a skill set or, how to adapt one's routine, whatever that might be. This is highly specific, highly bespoke, and personalized as to one's age, hormone level,
Yeah.
personal state, professional state, and also it integrates their personal value system, which might be impacting their communication performance at the time, which, for example, could be a cultural background.
If you had the opportunity to redesign or influence how communication is taught at schools, what would you do?
I think it's important to know that we need to stop evaluating personality and start measuring communication. And the way to do that is to look at very specific qualities such as latency and response under pressure, or ability to adapt to your audience. When you have these very specific metrics, that is when students learning these at the business school level, that is when they can take these into their professional fields and get a head start in their professional careers.
So in my profession, I'm very much into the luxury world, the retail world, and the business executive world. Recently, I was in touch with very, very famous luxury brands. One of the things that popped out in the conversation was that when internet came, a lot of brands that have fantastic showrooms were really afraid to lose their value and the competitive advantage that they could have by doing conventional retail in stores. And in reality, after a few years of trials and errors and also adapting their business models in the showroom, they realized that actually the retail and conventional retail in store was not about to disappear by being competed by internet and internet sales. Why? Because what was interesting to find in those stores was the personal experience of personal shoppers. And personal shoppers were walking into the world of the brand, discovering the DNA and the culture of the brand. And it was a very interesting challenge from the brand point of view because everything was based on mastering the art of communicating between a personal shopper and a client in 1 or 2 seconds. It was about getting the trust and being able to convey the DNA of the brand to the consumer. So can you let us know a little bit how communication intelligence, the concept that you master, fit into that kind of development?
Fabulous question. I'm working with some luxury brands right now on exactly this. And what is key is to understand the power of language and the power of silence. Because what you need to do when a client enters the showroom is to assess how do you sell a vision and how do you sell an experience more so than a product. They have arrived to the location with a vision in mind or a story in their mind. And how can you unfold that for them through building trust? That's the key. So something as simple as, thinking about a watch as a watch versus horology. Something as simple as that can completely change your perspective on how you approach a client. And you have a very short window, and this is what we work on. If you think about first impression science and how an impression is formed within the first 7 to 11 seconds of
Yes.
meeting someone, you might have heard of this.
Yes.
What's even more worrisome, is if you have a poor first impression, it can take up to 11 encounters to perhaps have the opportunity to regain that first impression. So how do you make the greatest impact knowing that I don't like to say it's the sale. It's not about the sale. It's about developing client trust and knowing that they will connect with you in that moment to make their vision come true.
That's very interesting. And it's a concept that could be taught to students and also taught in commercial teams in luxury brands, right? Do you have some programs, or what type of approach do you put forward?
It's very important to make sure it's done at different levels, because as much as you need to have training done for the staff, if you will, you need to know that it's being modeled by the management. So I'm a big believer that you develop a communication intelligence, a CQ ethos in how you run the day, and that you reinforce how communication is a key priority. And again, linking it back to ROI, knowing that if you are focusing and giving the gift of this type of a program to your employees, you'll see it back manyfold in your ROI.
Of course. We'll jump on a few questions, rapid fire. One habit every leader should build to improve their communication.
Pre-presentation routine is key. Knowing that communication is a focal point for your week and even more so for your day. Giving yourself a single communication goal per day will projectile your personal and professional success.
One mistake you see leaders repeat again and again.
Reacting without emotional regulation and self-awareness.
The most underrated skill in leadership communication.
Taking a short-term approach to communication training organizationally.
A moment on stage or in a room that taught you the most about yourself.
I'm going to say it was in Times Square, not on stage, in a form of a stage, but it was in Times Square when the CQ Edge was launched. And I looked up as a very private person, seeing myself on the Times Square edition billboard. And what it represented to me was the great trust that people had placed in me, and feeling very grateful and blessed for all that trust.
One question the leaders should ask themselves before they speak.
What is my goal in this moment?
So you have an upcoming CQ Edge online course. Who did you design it for, and what problem did you build it to solve?
The CQ online digital course is for individuals of, I'd say, pre-professional to professional level. It is designed to help individuals be guided through as if they're reading the book. It's a companion to the book. And so it's to guide individuals through the mind, body, voice CQ formula to really understand how can you maximize your communication intelligence and apply it to a personal or professional context that you currently have underway.
If someone is listening and thinking, this is for me, what do they expect to take away from your course?
It's important to know that this course will allow you to develop an elevated sense of self-awareness you could never expect. And it's that self-awareness which will unlock your capacity to be transformed in your communication skills.
Transform. So what would be the benefits of that transformation for the one who take the course and implement it?
I don't think there's anything as powerful as being heard. And on the flip side, there's nothing more imprisoning than not being heard. Knowing that you can share your ideas, your brilliance with your audience, be it a boardroom, be it a family member, be it a negotiation, is the most satisfying and authentic feeling. And I hope that everyone who does this program can benefit from that.
Where is the best place for people to go if they want to be the first to know when enrollment opens or get early access?
The quickest way to learn about it will be on Instagram at CQ with Sue. You'll also be able to find us at on LinkedIn at Sue Bridgman. And I am hopeful as well that it'll be on the Coffee Club.
Of course, we'll redirect everybody. If listeners remember only one idea from this conversation, what would you want it to be about communication and leadership today?
In an AI era, it isn't what you know. It's how you connect, how you communicate, and how you self-regulate. And that can be one superpower.
So it was a pleasure. Thank you very much for attending this Executive Coffee Club.
Thank you so much.
Take good care.
Thank you.